Good day. Let us welcome a new day to learn more and expand our knowledge. I am Marky Barayoga, and today we are going to talk about the different theories of economic development. For us to better understand what does it mean by a theory in economic development, let us dissect it word by word. First, we have a theory. Theory is a scientifically acceptable principle offered to explain a certain phenomenon, such as the Big Bang Theory, that explains how our world was created, or Darwin's theory of evolution, wherein it says that we came from apes. It is the same thing in economy. The economy we have didn't just sprout like a mushroom out of nothing. It has a theory that explains its origin and where it came from. Next, of course, we know what economy is and the importance it plays in our society. And lastly, development, or a positive change. Before we have the economy we know of today, let me lead you back to where it all started. There are 8 known theories that explains the development of our economy. We have the ancient economic ideas, medieval economic thoughts, the economic doctrine of mercantilism, Physiocracy, rule of nature, factors of economic development, theory on progress and poverty, modern theory of employment, and innovation theory. Ancient economic ideas. The beginnings of science and economics and economic institutions are often traced back to the Hebrews in Jewish times. The society discusses in the Old Testament mentions some of the characteristics of modern capitalism and private property. It is believed by some scholars that Western civilization has its origin in Hebrew civilization, such as the practice of division of labor, market, exchange, money, etc. Some of the notable economic activities believed to have been originated or present during this period are Hebrews, 2500 BC. During the Hebrews' times, these are their economic practices. Taxes. The toll tax was known as tribute realized from every male for the maintenance of temples. Money. The Hebrews seem to have understood the functions of money. Money was used mainly in the form of bullion. Property. In those days, land was the main form of property. Wealth was measured in lands, slaves, talents, silver, and other precious metals. The owner of a plot land was the owner of all resources above and below the surface of land. According to the law of inheritance, the first claim on property went to the eldest son. If there was no son, it went to the daughter, and in absence of a daughter, it might go to the close relatives. Plato, 427 to 347 BC. Plato was a Greek philosopher. He was born in Athens, Greece, from an aristocrat family. He was a pupil of Socrates. Some of his contributions in economic ideals were: he distinguished the 5 types of government, which are aristocracy, ruled by the best; democracy, ruled by the soldiers; oligarchy, ruled by a few; the rule of the wealth; and democracy. Division of labor. He also believed in the division of labor. He simply meant the division of labor as an aid to social organization. Therefore, a city must include a builder, a weaver, a farmer, a shoemaker, and other similar occupation. Size of population. The size of population was also analyzed by Plato. The right number of populations suggested by Plato for a state or a city was 5,040. Only such a number provided opportunity for everyone to be familiar with all other persons and help the economy to achieve self-sufficiency. Money. He did not favor the idea of allowing gold and silver to be used by common men. Instead, he suggested the use of domestic coin for payment of wages and other transactions. Agriculture. In terms of agriculture, Plato considered agriculture as the most desirable occupation. Aristotle, 384 to 322 BC. Aristotle was a Greek philosopher and polymath during the classical period in ancient Greece. He was a student of Plato. The following are his contributions in economic development. He believes that communism is not conducive to social peace. Quarrels are bound to develop when the principle of equal wages for equal work is not followed. Monopoly. Aristotle defined monopoly as a position in a market of a single seller. He condemned it as unjust. Romans. During Romans' time, the barter system was prevalent, but later, bimetallism, that is, coins of bronze and silver was adopted. Some commodities have greater value than their price. According to the Romans, price was determined by the forces of demand and supply. In the context of economy in the Philippines, there were also economic activities during this pre-colonial era, such as the native Filipinos trading goods and crops to Chinese, Indians, Arabs, and Japanese in exchange for pots, fabrics, and more. It was a barter system back then. But when we were colonized by the Spaniards, piloncitos, or coins made of gold were used as a medium of exchange. Medieval economic thoughts. Medieval economic thought is a theory written by Diana Woods of Cambridge University Press. Let me just highlight some of the important facts and events during the medieval times. The medieval era, often called the Middle Ages or the Dark Ages, began around 476 AD, following a great loss of power throughout Europe by the Roman Emperor. The period was one of human expansion, centralization, and great political upheaval and violence, resulting in the foundation of many modern European countries. It was also dominated by a surge in Christianity, leading to the building of great cathedrals, clearing of large tracts of land by peasants, settling of new towns and villages, and building of great castles by local nobility. The rise of banking. Banking started during the medieval era. The word bank derives from the Italian word for tables where the bankers sat in the marketplace. In the 13th century, indigenous Italian banking houses grew up with agencies as far afield as London and Paris. Spread of market economy. During these times, the expansion of trade drew more and more rural communities into the market economy. A market economy is an economic system in which the decisions regarding investment, production, and distribution are guided by the price signals created by the forces of supply and demand. Black Death. The Black Death affected the economy during the medieval era. It was a bubonic plague pandemic occurring in Afro-Eurasia from 1346 to 1353. It was the most fatal pandemic recorded in human history, resulting in the deaths of 75 to 200 million people in Eurasia and North Africa. In fact, it killed one-third of the entire population of Europe during the medieval times. Economic doctrine of mercantilism. Mercantilism is an economic theory where the government seeks to regulate economy and trade in order to promote domestic industry, often at the expense of other countries. Mercantilism is associated with policies which restrict imports, increases stock of goods, and protect domestic industries. Mercantilism stands in contrast to the theory of free trade, which argues countries' economic well-being can be best improved through the reduction of tariffs and fair free trade. Examples of mercantilism are England Navigation Act of 1651 prohibited foreign vessels engaging in coastal trade. Under the British Empire, India was restricted in buying from the domestic industries and were forced to import salt from the UK. Protests against this salt tax led to the salt tax revolt led by Gandhi. In 17th century France, the state promoted a controlled economy with strict regulations about the economy and labor markets. One important highlight that I would like to emphasize during this era is that the economy in general focuses on increase in exports and minimizes the imports, which is the total opposite of how economy works today. Remember, the GDP or gross domestic product plays an important role in the measurement of wealth of a country, with of course not setting aside the country's population, area, and country's debt. One thing more, bullionism, or the acquisition of gold and silver. The more the country have a reserve of these precious metals means they are a wealthy country. But now, it's a whole different thing. The wealth of a country can be measured through its GDP, natural resources, and human resources or professionals. So I think that although Philippines is a populous country, but if we work on improving education to produce professionals here and abroad, they become our assets. Physiocracy, rule of nature. Physiocracy is the collective name of those economic principles and policies which developed in France in the middle of the 18th century. Physiocracy is also known as the agricultural system. Economic thinkers who contributed to this growth and development of physiocracy have been called as the physiocrats. The term physiocracy derives from a collection of essays by François Quigny, edited by Pierre-Samuel Dupont de Nemours. They believe that the wealth of nations derives solely from the value of land agriculture or land development. The physiocrats have been regarded as the founders of economic science because they were the first to grasp the general principle underlying the economic phenomena and to evolve a theoretical system. Physiocracy is also remarked as the first school of economic thought. The term physiocracy means rule of nature. Factors of economic development. Economic development implies an improvement in economic welfare through higher real incomes and other welfare indices such as improved literacy, better infrastructure, reduced poverty, and better health care. These are the main factors of economic development. Levels of infrastructure. Infrastructure is basically the base in which economic growth is built. Roads, water systems, mass transportation, airports, and utilities are all examples of infrastructure. Countries with higher levels of infrastructure have a lower proportion of poverty because infrastructure increases the quality of human resources and improves capital efficiency, thus stimulating economic growth. Education. Levels and standards of education have a significant influence on labor productivity. Without basic literacy and numeracy, it is difficult for an economy to develop from manual labor to new higher tech industries in the service sector. Levels of inward investment. Developing countries that can attract inward investment can see significant growth and development due to higher levels of capital and benefits of attracting multinational companies into their economy. Levels of savings or capital. Higher savings enables a virtuous circle of increased investment, higher growth, and therefore higher savings. Political stability or law and order. Political stability and the protection of private property rank as the most important factors for encouraging firms to invest in developing economies. Any signs of instability increases the economic and personal risk of investing in developing countries. Of course, investors would always prefer putting up their businesses to countries that is more peaceful and has good political environment. Theory on Progress and Poverty. Progress and Poverty is Henry George's first book, which sold several million copies, exceeding all other books sold in the United States except the Bible during the 1890s. Progress and Poverty seeks to explain why poverty exists notwithstanding widespread advances in technology and even when there is a concentration of great wealth, such as in cities. George saw how technological and social advances, including education and public services, increased the value of land, such as natural resources, urban locations, etc., and thus the amount of wealth that can be demanded by the owners of land from those who need the use of land. In other words, the better the public services, the higher the rent is, as more people value that land. He proposes his own solution, a single tax on land values. George argued that a value tax would give landowners an incentive to use well-located land in a productive way, thereby increasing demand for labor and creating wealth. According to Henry George, man is the only animal whose desires increase as they are fed, the only animal that is never satisfied. Modern theory of employment. John Maynard Keynes was arguably the greatest economist of the 20th century. He discovered the idea that the government should stimulate demand during economic downturns, and was the creator of both the IMF and the World Bank. Keynes believed that what chiefly holds back the country is corruption, knee-jerk policies, and short-sightedness. But if these three ills are corrected, then humanity can look forward to an age of incredible and lasting wealth. Keynes' masterpiece was written in 1936, The General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money. In this work, Keynes set out to rethink the causes of unemployment, the hope of reducing new solutions to these intractable problems of the 1930s. Classical economics gives us three reasons why unemployment exists. Firstly, and most obviously, workers are temporarily unemployed when they move jobs. Secondly, individuals might simply elect not to work, particularly if they can support themselves through some form of welfare payment. But thirdly, and most interestingly, unemployment arises when wages are higher than what employers can afford. But Keynes took issue with this classical theory. In the 1930s, there were a huge number of people out of work, as many as 3 million in Britain and 15 million in the United States. These numbers were just too great to shrug off as a result of people being between jobs or simply idle. For Keynes, the real problem of unemployment lay in a lack of demand. Keynes argued that it was the job of the state to step in to create demand by running large deficit in order to create jobs. Practically, this could be done by raising loans and using the money to finance vast public works. These might include building roads or railways or else investment in other infrastructure that would not only create employment for people, but which would leave a useful legacy for private enterprise. Government should act as the primary shopper in the land, creating demand until more widespread sources of demand can return. Innovation theory. In every society, there are specific segments of the population that try a new product or adapt a new behavior at different stages. Early adapters are quick to try a new product before anyone else, while laggards are the last to try something or may not try it at all. In 1962, Everett Rogers, a professor of rural psychology, developed a theory called the diffusion of innovation theory. Rogers found that individuals within any society fall into one of 5 different adapters groups based on how early or how quickly they adapt an innovation. The innovators are a small but important group because they are the first to learn about and adapt an innovation. They are risk-taking, adventurous, and like being on a cutting edge. The innovators are responsible for introducing to the larger population because they share their experiences with their friends and communities. Early adopters. Their endorsement of an innovation plays a key role in what we call crossing the chasm, which is when the adoption of an innovation bridges the gap between trendsetters and the majority. Early majority group. They take time to make decisions. They will observe others' experiences, and they will only adapt a product once they are convinced it has real benefits and that it is the new status quo. The late majority group. They are more resistant to change, but they are very responsive to peer pressure. They want innovations to be very well tested and widely used before they will risk trying. The laggards. They are highly resistant to change, and they can also be hard to reach with marketing campaigns because they have often very minimal exposure to media. Laggards wait until innovation is completely mainstream before they adapt, and in some cases, they never do. Think of some global innovations, such as the use of social media, or the most recent issue we have today, which is the vaccination for COVID. People may vary their responses on this new innovation. So the next time we introduce new things to people, it is important to consider the right channel and communication to use to effectively catalyze the widespread adoption of such new innovation. So that is the end of our lesson for today. The biggest takeaway that personally I can get from this lesson is that these theories can be the basis of our economies to solve problems we encounter in the present and to better our responses for a better outcome in the future. Thank you for watching, and see you on the next video where we talk about anything under the sun as long as it feeds our mind with new learning. Stay safe and God bless.
Wanna lay down by the fire with you. Our souls are glowing, every warm or two. Your love surrounds me like a lullaby, singing softly, you are mine, oh my.